Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm your host, Joe.
I'm Sunny. Grab your coffee, everyone, because today's deep dive is a really fun one.
It really is. And, it actually ties into this incredibly wild brain experiment you've been putting yourself through lately.
I mean, I wouldn't call it an experiment. It's more like highly targeted limbic system conditioning.
Oh, listen to you using the fancy neuroscience terms. For our Sip and Talkers out there, I've been learning from her lately. I've basically been sitting in the dark after work, wearing ANC headphones and blasting these low-frequency ambient tracks on loop.
Are your cortisol levels really that high right now?
I mean, yes, urban life is super stressful, but biologically speaking, pumping that low-frequency chest resonance straight into your ears is genuinely the cheapest, fastest way to force your amygdala to calm down. It just got me thinking about how sound literally shapes our brains.
Right. And, speaking of using music to just instantly rewire your emotional state, I have to bring up our old friend Mickey.
Oh, man, Mickey is an absolute treasure. He really is. If any of you watch his vlogs, he's always like rushing to catch a train, staying up all night writing, just looking a bit unpolished and delightfully clumsy. But the second he picks up an instrument, it's like his brain enters cheat mode.
Totally. There's none of that oily, overproduced digital plastic feel to his tracks.
Exactly. The melody hits, and it just has this incredibly raw, authentic vitality. It totally bypasses your logic and punches your limbic system right in the gut. It's like the ultimate social glue.
It really is. We always talk about language being our primary protocol for, transferring data. But Mickey's tracks, they use melody as the foundational logic for an encrypted trust protocol directly with your brain.
I know, right? I was actually listening to a demo he just sent over right before we hit record. It's just wild how a few notes can immediately shock your neurons into feeling something so specific.
Yeah, and that's exactly our mission today. We're going to bridge the gap between prehistoric survival tactics around ancient campfires and, our modern cyberspace alienation.
We really need to figure out why humans are uniquely wired to be this musical species and, what happens when that deeply ancient wiring crashes headfirst into the digital age.
So if you're listening to this on your commute right now with your headphones on, your brain is currently running a massively complex algorithm.
But before we get into the evolution of it all, how does a sound wave physically alter our state of mind? Like, why do we get literal chills?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the research from cognitive scientist Elizabeth Margulis. She points out this staggering statistic. We actually spend 30 to 50% of our waking hours just daydreaming.
Wait, half our day? That is insane.
I know. Your mind is basically untethered, running background simulations all day. And this happens in a high-level brain area called the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, the DMN? Isn't that just the network that turns on when you're spacing out?
Exactly. The DMN is your brain's daydreaming engine. It's responsible for imagining the past and running simulations of the future. It's your internal narrative. So when a track plays, it doesn't just sit in your auditory cortex. It locks onto the DMN and effectively steers those simulations.
Oh, wow. So it's basically like that movie Inception, where they implant an idea in someone's dream, music slips past all our logical conscious defenses, and acts like a hidden source code, just subconsciously rewriting our mental theater.
That's a really great way to visualize it. You hear a certain minor chord progression, and suddenly your brain projects a whole melancholic cinematic scene in your head. It's steering the ship of your subconscious.
But wait, if it's acting like source code, does it run the same way on every computer?
Yeah.
We always hear that cliche, that music is the universal language. If you and I hear the exact same song, are we picturing the exact same things?
Actually, no. And that's one of the biggest myths Margulis's research debunks. Music is not a universal language at all. It is heavily filtered by our culture.
Really? How so?
Well, she did this incredible study in a remote village called Dameng in China. She took identical pieces of atonal Western music and played them for both American participants and the villagers in Dameng.
Just so we're all on the same page, atonal music is the stuff that sounds super unpredictable, right? No clear key center, jumping all over the place.
Precisely. Now, when the Westerners heard this atonal music, their brains were frantically trying to do the math. They were searching for the harmonic patterns they grew up with, like a dominant chord resolving to a tonic chord.
Right, like a standard pop song resolving at the end of a chorus.
Exactly. But because the music didn't resolve that way, their brain's predictive engine basically threw a syntax error. It triggered a mild stress response. So their cultural filters interpreted the audio as eerie. They literally reported imagining scenes from a murder mystery soundtrack, like someone being stalked in the woods.
Oh, that's wild. Okay, so their brains were stressed because the math didn't add up. What about the villagers in Damang?
The villagers had a completely different set of cultural data. They weren't tracking harmonic resolution at all. Their musical tradition trained them to track rhythmic jumps. So when they heard those unpredictable jumpy notes, their brains didn't register a syntax error.
What did they register it as then?
Dynamic movement. To them, the exact same audio sounded playful. They imagined animals jumping around.
That is absolutely fascinating. So if you're listening right now, your brain is constantly running background probability calculations based entirely on whatever community you grew up in.
Right. It relies on implicit knowledge, which is this totally unconscious pattern tracking system.
Okay, so if the brain is constantly doing this intense cultural math, how did that translate into the physical reactions? Like, why do we feel the sudden need to tap our feet?
Because it's a full brain symphony. When you listen to a track, your frontal lobe fires up to anticipate the next note. Then your motor cortex and your cerebellum get activated.
Wait, the motor cortex? But I'm just sitting still on the subway, right?
Yes, but the auditory system is deeply hardwired to the motor system. That's why you suddenly feel the physical urge to tap your foot or nod your head. It is a biological imperative. And simultaneously, your limbic system, which is the ancient emotional center, is processing the deep emotional resonance.
Man, so it really is a whole brain workout.
And it comes with a potent chemical payload, too. Researchers at McGill University mapped out exactly how this manipulates our neurochemistry. When that frontal lobe correctly predicts the next note, or when a song hits that perfect chord, your brain rewards you with a massive hit of dopamine.
Ah, the famous reward chemical.
Exactly. It triggers those literal physical chills. What's incredible here is that it's hijacking the exact same biological reward system that evolved to keep us alive. Your brain gives you the same chemical reward for predicting a musical pattern that it gives you for eating high-calorie foods.
So listening is just soaking in the dopamine, like eating a massive double cheeseburger with your ears.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly like that. And it doesn't stop there. Slow tempos literally lower your cortisol, reducing stress biomarkers. And group singing, that releases oxytocin, the trust hormone.
So listening is basically a soul spa for the brain. But if just listening requires the frontal lobe, the motor cortex, and the limbic system, then playing an instrument has to be the opposite, right? Like forcing your brain to do extreme CrossFit.
That is a surprisingly accurate analogy,
Yep.
and you can actually see the physical evidence of that CrossFit on an fMRI scan. Harvard research shows that trained musicians actually develop an enlarged corpus callosum.
Oh, that's the bundle of nerve fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain, right?
Yep. Because playing an instrument requires your motor cortex, your visual cortex, and your auditory cortex to communicate at lightning speed, that neural bridge physically gets thicker and faster. And this deep structural wiring is exactly why music therapy works absolute miracles in medicine.
Oh, this is the stuff that always blows my mind. Tell me about the Alzheimer's patients.
It's just incredible. A patient might not be able to remember their own child's name, but if you play a song from their youth, they can suddenly sing every word perfectly. Why? Because musical memory isn't stored in one place. It's distributed across a massive neural network, completely bypassing the damaged temporal lobe.
That is so beautiful.
It really is. But it goes beyond just memory. Think about a stroke patient who has lost the ability to walk because their motor planning area is damaged. Therapists use a technique called rhythmic auditory stimulation, or RAS.
How did that work? You just play a beat and they can walk.
Essentially, yes. Remember how the auditory cortex is wired straight to the motor cortex? By playing a strict, heavy external beat, the sound wave acts as an external pacemaker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it physically bypasses the damaged brain regions and sends an electrical impulse straight to the leg muscles, forcing them to fire in time with the rhythm. The brain recalibrates, and they learn to walk again.
That is just breathtaking. A sound wave physically forcing a leg muscle to move. But hold on a second. This actually brings up a huge contradiction.
Ooh!
Well, if this requires so much brain power, burns so many calories, and relies on this insanely complex neural architecture, why in the world did our hunter-gatherer ancestors invent it? I mean, if you're just trying to survive freezing winters and avoid saber-toothed tigers, you don't really have time to build an enlarged corpus callosum. It seems like a massive waste of survival energy. Surely some anthropologists think it was just an evolutionary accident, right?
You have just stepped into one of the most vicious, fiercely debated arenas in cognitive science. And you're echoing a very famous argument by the cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker. He proposed the auditory cheesecake theory.
Auditory cheesecake, what does that even mean?
Well, Pinker argues that it's completely useless for survival. In his view, the human brain evolved complex language and auditory analysis just to survive in the wild. He says music is just a pleasant, accidental byproduct of those survival systems, like cheesecake.
Okay, I follow, but explain the cheesecake part.
We evolved to crave fat and sugar to survive famines, right? We didn't evolve for cheesecake. We just invented it to press those existing pleasure buttons. Pinker thinks music is just us pressing our brain's pleasure buttons.
I mean, I love a good cheesecake, but that theory feels incredibly dismissive. You don't see every culture on Earth independently inventing cheesecake, but literally every culture has music.
Exactly. And that's why modern anthropologists, following Charles Darwin's lead, fundamentally reject Pinker's theory. Harvard's music lab, along with archaeological finds like a 40,000-year-old bone flute found in a cave, strongly suggest that this isn't an accident. It's a fundamental biological survival tool. It likely predates complex language entirely.
Okay, I need to push back here. How exactly does a bone flute keep anyone alive? A lullaby isn't going to save you from a spear.
It doesn't block a spear, but it organizes the people holding the spears. Researchers have identified 4 primal survival functions. The first, and arguably the most crucial, is social glue. This ties directly into the Dunbar number.
Right, the idea that the human brain can only maintain about 150 stable social relationships.
Spot on. If you look at other primate societies, they build trust and alliances by physically grooming each other. Picking bugs out of fur releases endorphins. It creates a bond. But as human tribes grew closer to that 150 mark, physical grooming became mathematically impossible. You can't spend your whole day picking bugs off 100 people. You'd starve.
So how do you keep a massive tribe of 150 people from fracturing into chaos and killing each other?
Rhythmic synchronization. Singing, clapping, and chanting together became a highly efficient virtual grooming tool. When 50 people sing and stomp their feet in perfect time, the entire group gets a massive endorphin and oxytocin release simultaneously. It was the ultimate technology to prevent tribal collapse. They literally drummed their way into a cohesive society.
Okay, so singing together keeps the peace inside your own camp. But what happens when your peaceful singing camp bumps into a rival tribe?
That brings us to the second function, which is coalition signaling. Think about synchronized war dances, like the Maori haka. When a rival tribe approaches, seeing a group of warriors moving, stomping, and chanting in absolute flawless synchrony sends an unfakeable military signal.
Unfakeable.
Yes. You cannot fake perfect rhythm across 50 people. It proves to the enemy that this group has spent hundreds of hours practicing together, which implies they have deep trust and they will fight together just as flawlessly.
It's a massive deterrent. Like, look how perfectly we step together. Imagine what we will do to you in battle. That is intense. Okay, what about the third function?
The third is infant-directed song, commonly known as Mother Reese. This goes all the way back to our evolution of walking upright. Bipedalism narrowed the human birth canal. This meant babies had to be born prematurely compared to other primates. A newborn foal can walk in hours, but a human baby is incredibly helpless for years.
Right, and a helpless baby needs to be carried constantly.
But a mother also needs her hands free to forage for food, or the baby starves. So singing evolved as a mechanism to signal safety across a physical distance. The mother could put the infant down, and as long as the baby heard that specific, rhythmic, melodic pattern, the infant's brain knew it was safe.
Oh, wow. So it wouldn't cry out and attract predators?
Exactly. It directly boosted infant survival by acting as a wireless tether.
A wireless tether of safety. I love that so much. And the fourth function?
Sexual selection. This was Darwin's primary view. Having flawless rhythm, perfect pitch, and an encyclopedic memory for songs was a massive biological megaphone. It broadcast to potential mates that you had superior genetic health, no neurological defects, and most importantly, enough excess calories and energy to practice art instead of just scavenging for survival.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We spent 40,000 years evolving to use this as a vital communal social glue, a military deterrent, a baby monitor, and a dating profile around a campfire. But here's where my mind is totally bending. Today, we experience this completely differently. I put on my ANC headphones on a crowded subway to deliberately isolate myself from the very tribe sitting right next to me. Isn't that an evolutionary short circuit? We're using a tool designed for connection to enforce isolation.
It is the ultimate biological paradox, and it leads to what anthropologists call the implosion of music. It's a biological maladaptation. When ancient biology meets modern streaming, we get 4 dimensions of digital alienation. The first is what we call social fraud.
Social fraud. That sounds like we're committing a crime against our own brains.
We kind of are. When you put on those headphones and listen to a soaring track, your brain gives you the physiological paycheck of socializing. You get the dopamine and the oxytocin. Your brain thinks you're bonding with the tribe, but you're actually sitting alone.
Oh, man. So we're getting the neurochemical reward without paying the actual cost of human interaction, which requires compromise and vulnerability and actually listening to others. We are basically self-medicating our urban anxiety.
Exactly. The second dimension is dephysicalized tribes. Instead of sweating in a war dance to prove our allegiance and build deep, unfakeable trust, what do we do today? We share our Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year.
Oh, wow. We replaced the sweat of the war dance with a screenshot on our social feed.
Precisely. It creates a low-cost, fragile, algorithmic echo chamber. We find people with our exact taste, but without the physical synchrony, the biological bond is incredibly shallow.
That stings a little, but it's so true. What's the third dimension?
Parasocial motherese. Remember how ancient mothers used song to comfort infants from a distance? Today, we outsource our emotional safety to distant creators on the internet.
Wait, so when I'm stressed and I pull up a YouTube vlog from someone I follow, or I put on a playlist by a specific indie artist, my brain is reverting to that infant safety limbic response.
Yes. It triggers the exact same neural pathways. The creator's voice or melody signals to your amygdala that you are safe in the camp, but it creates a one-sided parasocial dependency. The creator doesn't know you exist, but your ancient brain feels deeply nurtured and protected by them.
Okay, that explains so much about modern internet culture. Watching someone like Mickey travel and just talk to the camera feels so soothing because it's tapping right into that parasocial motherese.
Exactly. And the final dimension of this implosion is the loss of ritual. For tens of thousands of years, this was a sacred, physical, scarce event. You had to be there in person. Now it's commodified into infinite background noise just to optimize your email writing efficiency. We've stripped the physical ritual away and turned a profound biological event into a mere productivity hack.
You know, hearing all of this, it paints a pretty stark picture. On one hand, our headphone habits are definitely a form of social fraud. It's like philosopher Jean Baudrillard's concept of simulacra, right? We're simulating a campfire that isn't actually there. We get the warmth, but there's no actual fire. But on the other hand, considering how overwhelming modern life is, maybe this is technology's most gentle compensation.
I agree completely. It's a coping mechanism for a world our brains weren't built for. We still have the brains of hunter-gatherers, but we're navigating concrete jungles. We are still that prehistoric musical species, desperately craving connection. We just have to find it in new ways.
Which honestly is exactly why I think creators who keep things raw and authentic are so important right now. That deep craving for real connection is why the ambient music and vlogs from creators like Mickey resonate so intensely with our primal brains today. By the way, if you haven't already, you absolutely need to check out his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, for his latest travel vlogs. His stuff completely bypasses all this digital noise and hits right at that ancient need for a shared human experience.
Absolutely. The fundamental need for a tribe hasn't disappeared, only the tools to find them have changed. And that brings up a really vital, provocative question for you, the listener, to take away from this exploration.
What's the question?
The next time you put on your noise-canceling headphones to block out the world, ask yourself, are you truly trying to be alone? Or is your ancient brain just desperately searching cyberspace for its lost tribe?
Wow. That is a thought that is going to stick with me every single time I hit play. To all our Sip and Talkers out there, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. If you've got a song that saved your brain during a lonely moment, or if you just want to talk about how weird it is that we're all walking around simulating campfires, let us know. Be sure to subscribe to Sip and Talk wherever you get your audio, and definitely don't forget to check out Mickey to Life on YouTube. We will see you next time.